Welcome to the Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled. We're thrilled to take you on a monthly journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. From the coolest gadgets lighting up your Instagram feeds to groundbreaking services revolutionizing our daily lives, we're here to spotlight the innovations and, more importantly, the innovators. So gear up for an energetic and informative ride as we delve deep into the stories, the challenges, and the triumphs of the creative geniuses shaping our future. This is Ingleside Reviews Innovators Unveiled. And now your host, A.D. Edwards.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Innovators Unveiled. Today, we're joined by Glenn Rudin, a seasoned expert in sales, marketing, and branding, a communication strategist, and he's known as the Messenger Master. So Glenn has spent over 35 years helping entrepreneurs build, craft, and impact their branding strategies. He's also the author of a book entitled A Brand in Your Hand. He empowers others to communicate their value with clarity and confidence. But before Glenn became a messaging guru, let's explore what his roots are and the experiences that he had that shaped his passion for communication and how his journey unfolded. Glenn, welcome to the show.
AD, it is so great to be here. I'm glad we're able to work this out. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here with you.
Yes. So our audience is passionate about entrepreneurship. And one of the things we try to stress is that everyone had a story, and everyone's story involved overcoming obstacles. So that's what we talk about on this show, to help people stay on the course, stay vigilant, stay consistent and persistent in pursuing their dreams. So when it comes to your entrepreneurial background, it's important we get to know it. But I want to ask a few questions about your background as far as personal, like where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Okay, so don't hold it against me, but I grew up in northern New Jersey in Bergen County, and I had your pretty much run-of-the-mill childhood. Nothing too unique or outstanding. You know, played Little League and listened to whatever the hot music was on FM radio, if I can say that. I don't know how young your audience will skew, if they'll even know what that means, but pretty basic stuff. So I've always been a New Yorker, grew up in the New York area, and then spent 4 years at the University of Maryland in College Park, and then basically right back up into the New York area and into the workforce.
Okay.
So pretty standard growing up stuff.
Yeah, East Coaster. Okay, that's
East
nice.
Coaster.
So did you have any entrepreneurial creative ventures when you were a kid, teenager, or a young adult?
I did. It's so interesting you asked that. So, first on the sidelines, I would see other, mainly guys, I don't think too many young women, delivering newspapers. And I thought, gee, that looked like fun until I tried that one time. And I was like, I took someone's place for about a week and I said, I'm never going to do that again because nothing but complaints from people. You didn't put my paper here. I wanted it there. I wanted it this time, that time. Anyway, that wasn't a good one.
What time of the day were you waking up for that?
Oh, no, mine was in the afternoon. Although
okay.
One of the jobs I had, one of my uncles had a candy store, and my dad got me a job working with him on Sundays, folding together the New York Times newspaper. And, I was about 16 at the time. He probably, didn't go to sleep early enough. He'd be outside honking his horn at 4 a.m. on Sunday morning for me to get in the car with him and go to his candy store and fold up his newspapers. In growing up in northern New Jersey and, in the cold, we would pray for big snowstorms where we could go house to house, knock on, doors and shovel driveways for $15 or $20. That was a big deal.
I'm from Chicago. I remember those days. I know what that's like.
You would, absolutely, in the Windy City. Put ads in the paper when I was old enough to drive and would go door to door, washing, and waxing and vacuuming people's cars, made some pretty good money doing that. So always had this entrepreneurial spirit, AD, for sure. It's something I always loved doing. One time I was sure I was going to corner the market when there was a boy band in the, well, this is a long time ago. They were called New Kids on the Block. I forget who the big star was,
I remember
but
those
I
guys.
took an ad out in one of the little teen magazines. It must have been like the size of a postage stamp. And I had got these New Kids on the Block hats. And I figured all I got to do is put this ad in. They have a circulation of like, I don't know, 1 million magazines. So many people are going to see it. I got my calculator out, did all the math. If I get a 3% penetration, I'm going to sell so many hats. And I think I sold 15 hats.
Well, you put the effort. That's what counts. You mentioned, I believe your uncle owned a store. Was there any other specific people or moments in your youth that sparked an interest in entrepreneurship, or rather in communications and marketing, that part of it? Because I'm trying to get to where you made the shift, the paradigm.
Yeah, great question. And let me say this. What I like to say when someone asks me that is I started my sales training when I was around 10 years old. And people are like, what? What kind of sales training were you in when you were 10? And they're thinking I went to some academy or some school. No, my dad was an electronics salesman. He worked for a company called Emerson that made hi-fi equipment and transistor radios like GE or RCA. And his route was calling on these small mom and pop electronics stores, which of course don't exist anymore. Today, everything is Best Buy or Amazon or Costco, to go get your TV. But back in the day, you'd go into these little stores on Main Street and you'd be able to shop for your radio, your TV, your big hi-fi phonograph, whatever it was. My dad was a salesman for those stores. And certain days, if I was off from school, he would say, hey, you want to go on the road with me today? And, that was never like overnight. It was always, local stuff for the day. And we would go into these different stores. And my dad would, go into the store and my last name Rudin. So they'd call him Rudy was his nickname. Hey, Rudy, how you doing? I was like, wow, they don't even call my dad's name was George. They don't even call by his first name, calling him Rudy. Go into the store. And before I knew it, he was like behind the counter in the store. And I'm like, Dad, you can't go behind the counter. Like that's the owner goes back there, And then a minute later, he was in the stock room. And I'm like, you're going to get in so much trouble going into the stock room. And before I knew it, they were sitting down. They were exchanging stories. They were talking about family stuff, personal stuff. And I learned all this stuff about people working with people that they know, like, and trust. And I watched my dad do this so effortlessly. And I watched how he managed these relationships, AD, with these people. He had them literally eating out of their hands. So when it came time to actually write up the order for what they were going to be purchasing for the next, whatever, month, 2 months, 3 months supply, he'd write up an order and go to show it to him. They'd be like, oh, come on, Rudy, you're the expert. Where do I sign? They'd sign it, a couple more quick exchanges. Who do you like in the big game this week? Hey, little Rudy, are you going to, take over the territory someday? And, there we go, on the way.
All about relationships.
All about relationships, all about how you respect people and people respect you, all about how to be prepared, how to look the part, how to give off a great message of confidence. In other words, my father walked in the store. He looked like $1 million. He was wearing a suit. They knew he meant business. He was professional. He spoke well. He had great one-to-one correspondence, good eye contact, the handshakes, all that stuff that we all kind of take for granted, that we don't realize that in just a couple seconds, when we show up at a meeting, at a chamber of commerce, at a trade show, people like this are evaluating all that nonverbal stuff, all that salespersonship, if I can say that to be politically correct. It all matters. And I was watching my dad do that as a pro when I was just 10. I never forgot those lessons, never forgot them.
And they stuck with you. I could see that, because that's one of the things you're passionate about, helping people brand who they are. And so when it comes to branding, what inspired you to focus on your career, but having a career that was basically about helping others?
Yeah, I love it. So I've always been in product development, AD, and what I realized about 10 years ago was that people are products. We have to market ourselves no differently than, if I pick up, some, random bottle of, whatever product this happens to be. This sits on a shelf in a store. It can't do much more than have a nice label. And I worked on projects like that with Revlon, Shiseido Cosmetics, Cheeseboro Ponds. But what I figured out about 10 years ago was that people are products. We have to brand ourselves. We have to advertise ourselves. We basically have to package ourselves in ways that we are attractive to other people and we're able to draw them in. And then we've got to be able to speak, to advertise for ourselves, to get people interested in what we do. And what I realized was that most people, I'm going to say 9 out of 10, struggle with all of these different things. 75% of people have fear of public speaking. Another huge percentage of people are not confident about the way they look. A lot of people might feel good about the way they look, but they dress terribly. A lot of people don't realize that when they start speaking, they're looking off in all different kinds of directions as opposed to right at you when they need to make a great first impression. So I realized that so many people were struggling with all these things. I'm wondering if there's a business there where I can apply all these principles to packaging and branding and start bringing it to people and making them more aware of the impressions they make and how important it is to make great first impressions, because very often that's the only one that we get to make on people when they decide whether or not they really want to work with us or not.
So when a person's an entrepreneur and they're looking for people to partner with, or they're looking for investors, or they're looking for customers, in your experience, what makes their message truly memorable?
Well, first of all, it's the way that it's delivered. Very often people, when they're doing, whether it's an elevator pitch or they're doing a pitch deck presentation, they have a tendency to make it really wordy and really complicated. And at the end of the day, no matter who you are, no matter what level of success or sophistication you're at, the simpler you can make it, the more easy it is to understand what the value is that you're trying to present to someone, the better the chance you have to engage them. And that doesn't, that goes all the way down to the smallest level of a kid trying to get his parent to let him go to the movies and being able to sell them on that concept, all the way up to somebody who's trying to do a multi-million-dollar offering to some investor that they want to put money into their company. The
So,
simpler,
so,
the easier, the more succinct that you are with what you're trying to present by giving somebody the vision of what they're going to get out of it, the better the chance somebody is going to engage with you and want to hear more.
so
And
what
so
what do
many
you
people,
say
go ahead.
to the individual who's afraid that if I don't tell this person everything about my company, they won't know what I do and they won't be able to differentiate me between someone else that does something similar? Because sometimes people tend to overtalk.
Oh my goodness. It's one of the worst problems people have. And that usually comes, AD, from a lack of preparation and nervousness. People who are supposed to be doing it, we've all been there, supposed to be doing a 30-second elevator pitch. And 5 minutes later, they're still rambling on, and everybody around the table is thinking to themselves, could somebody cut the string so this person stops talking already?
Right.
Yeah, we have a tendency to do two things. One, over talk, and two, overcomplicate. We somehow think that if we make it really complicated, we use what I call SAT or college words in our presentation, that it's going to make us sound smart, like we know what we're talking about. But the truth is, the more complicated we make it, the less people who are hearing it understand it. And the thing about making presentations like that is when somebody, especially some high-end investor, doesn't understand something, usually they're not going to say to you, I don't know what that word means, because that makes them look like they don't know what they're talking about. They'll just usually nod their head, and now they're starting to tune you out.
Right.
So it's really important to not complicate things. It's really important to not overtalk it. And the only way you can really do that is if you really take the time to intensely and intentionally prepare up front with what your remarks need to be. So you're giving somebody just enough so that they're on the edge of their seat. And when you stop, they want to hear more. They're leaning in.
Okay, that sounds good. Makes sense to me. Now, can you share any examples of a business transformation that you've guided through, improve messaging, help them improve their message?
Sure, sure. So, about 2, 3 years ago, a woman who had been a career pharmaceutical salesperson, but had a real passion for cooking, heard me on various social media platforms and came to me and said, "Listen, I've got this real desire to be cooking high end meals as and distributing them." She's up in the Seattle area, and so we had an initial conversation, and what she was trying to do was serve better food options delivery wise to businesses around the downtown Seattle area. Didn't go well because people were already into their patterns and they were already shopping at whatever it is, whether it's, McDonald's or local pizza place, local sushi place. She had a really hard time because it was really hard for her to duplicate her lunches, get them out to a lot of people. And I said to her, listen, why don't you take your passion for good food, for healthy food choices, and why don't we go really upscale? Why don't we start doing this on a really individual, unique basis for wealthy homeowners and start making 5-star gourmet meals that you cook in people's kitchens? And she loved that. And I said, we can market you through high end events like horse racing, expensive car rallies, country club events where people who are really well heeled but are looking for a really unique gourmet dining experience where you'll come in and cook them a 5-star meal in their own kitchen. You'll bring the ingredients, you'll bring the recipes. All they have to do is make the kitchen available and tell you when to be there. And you'll serve up a 5-star meal that they would normally spend, let's say $300, $400, $500 on at a fancy restaurant in downtown Seattle. You're going to give them that same experience, but at home wearing your chef's apron. And I even came up with the name for her, Your Gourmet Chef. And she's doing really well with that concept for the past few years now.
Awesome.
Really doing well.
Awesome.
She does these events on yachts. She does them in people's kitchens. And she specializes in the Mediterranean diet. So really healthy choices with a lot of seafood, a lot of olive oil based recipes and things like that, really healthy stuff. So that was a great transformation, yes, going from serving individual lunches in downtown Seattle to the really high end and competing with the really creme de la creme restaurants in Seattle.
So it seems from that experience that sometimes it's not only the message, but who you're delivering the message to. Your audience has to be the right receiver for the message. So that makes a difference. Let's talk about this book, A Brand in Your Hand. Now, yes, that's it. So you got to let us know exactly where we can pick this book up.
So this is available on Amazon if you go ahead and look it up. And what's interesting about this book, AD, is that when I wrote this book, I originally thought that I was going to take one of my professional speeches and just reduce it to words and writing, which a lot of speakers do. But as a creative guy, and my company is called Always Been Creative, and I'm known as the Message Master, I said, I've got to do something more unique than that. And so I set out to be the Dr. Seuss of adult business books. And I wrote this entire book in rhymes and had it illustrated with all these great photos. And I'll try to give you a sense here for a good passage here that'll give you an idea. Like here's a section on your personal brand. And so what it says here for your personal brand. So just what exactly is your personal brand? It's the impression we get as we shake your hand. What's the first thing that will come to our mind? You'll want us to think we've made quite a find. So the whole book is written like that and introduces concepts like personal brand, audience evaluation, mission statement, things like that. It's got a journal in the back so you can kind of record notes on your brand and what you're doing. And it's a great little book to introduce people who've never been exposed to all this branding and messaging and pitch stuff like me. In an afternoon, you can go through my rhymes and start to get the basics for what you need to start pulling together on your entrepreneurial journey.
So basically, like you said, the elevator pitch has to be simple and succinct. You did this in a book form. You simplified it so that a novice or someone that's new in the entrepreneurial world can really grasp what's important about branding.
There you go. And there's a whole section, about 5 or 6 paragraphs on the elevator pitch right next to an elevator. And you can see the little stopwatch in here, giving somebody the idea you only have a few seconds to get your pitch across. Right. So the whole your elevator pitch is the next thing to master. If you're unprepared, it can be a disaster. You've got a few seconds to make an impression to let us know why this is now your obsession.
I like that. So what's the most surprising, meaningful feedback that you've received about your book?
Well, I'm really impressed that people, I will introduce rhymes like that in some of my social media and other areas. And when you're writing in rhymes, AD, it is now taking the creative writing to a whole different level. In other words, some people will want to write posts and passages and, on LinkedIn or in their social media or in their stuff that they put out about their company, their literature. It's a whole different level now to take it to rhyming, where now you've got to have creative content that makes sense, but now you're writing it in rhymes. And people love poetry. They love rhymes. We all grew up on eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the
toe.
There you go. We remember stuff like that, even though you probably haven't heard eeny, meeny, miny in 25 years, maybe more. But we remember that stuff. And people are impressed with the poetry side of it, that somebody who calls himself creative went that next step to write a book that wasn't just a book, but a book that rhymes.
Right. So if a business owner were to take just one piece of advice from your book, what would you say it should be?
Look, I would say the number one piece of advice that you need to take from my book is, if you've got a great idea that's swimming around up here, until you start working on it, put it on paper, share it with AD or somebody else, it's just a fantasy. It's just a daydream. And, right in the book, I think somewhere right in, in the beginning, there's a little story here about, do you have a new venture you'd like to pursue, a new business idea burning inside of you? If this is something you've been thinking about, you've come to the right place to sort it all out. You've got to start working on it.
Yes.
You got to get it out there. You got to put it on paper. You've got to make it real, because until you make it real, the world can't take it as real either.
I listened to a podcast. I watch these shows, The Man Who Built America. I listen to the podcast. One of my favorite podcasts is the Founders Podcast.
Yeah.
And the host talks about, he reads these books and these autobiographies of some of the world's best business leaders. And he was talking about writing down ideas. And he said that Richard Branson in his autobiography said that he carried a piece of paper with him every time before he started Virgin. And that was like his holy grail, his Bible, because once you get an idea, sometimes if it goes away, Glenn, it's gone.
It's gone. It's in the ether, never coming back.
Yep. Yep. So how was writing the book? How's it influenced your approach to like coaching and consulting others?
Well, look, my passion for the way I wrote the book is the same kind of passion that I have for coaching people. I just think that people have so much potential and they don't necessarily believe in themselves. They don't necessarily think they can get it done. And one of the most rewarding things about being a coach in business is giving somebody that self-confidence, is in hearing their idea and helping them develop that idea to the point that now they feel good about communicating about it, then helping them with that communication skill so they can go out and confidently sell their concept to the world. So working on the book really enabled me in short order to really summarize what some of these steps are that somebody needs to introduce themselves to at least get familiar with it. In other words, I've got this idea in my head. And I'm going to write it down on paper. And if I go through the passages in my book, it at least gives you some starting points, easy ways to start moving forward and progressing on what it is. And it'll take you a little bit further along the path. Then, you're ready for a coach. Then you're ready for somebody to come in and say, hey, looks like you've got some good basics down here on paper. Now let's see if we can really flesh this out. Let's see if we can really build this into something, if we can differentiate it from what's out there in the world so that when the world hears about it, they're really interested in hearing more about it. And that really is the opportunity that you're looking for.
Yes.
Somebody gets engaged, they want to know more about it. And now you've got the opportunity, after you've done a good pitch, to really sit down with somebody one-on-one and really take them through the details of what it is you're trying to do.
Exactly. That makes sense. That makes total sense. So as an entrepreneur, realistically, you're going to face challenges, you're going to face problems. So let me ask you a few questions about challenging and situations and problem solving that you had to encounter and overcome. What's been the most challenging messaging or branding problem you've encountered, and how did you go about solving it?
Well, one of the big challenges when I started my company, Always Been Creative, I labored over the name because I really wanted to get a couple things accomplished. I wanted the term creative in the name because I always wanted people to know that that's something that I specialized in, being creative. I also wanted to have a good acronym. So if you notice, Always Been Creative, ABC for short. And so it probably took me about 6 months of going through late at night after work, putting names out there, searching for URLs where I knew I could get a .com for it, coming up with something that was creative, that had creative in it, that had a good acronym. That was a big challenge, coming up with that. And then facing the challenge, even though I'd started a number of my own companies, I was working in a partnership with two other guys, and I'd kind of hit the end of the road with them. I'd been tired of working with them, and even in a little company like that where we had 6 or 7 people, there were politics that I didn't care for, and I felt like I'm ready to do this on my own. And that was a big challenge too. Big challenge to to say to myself, you know what, it's time to jump out of the plane again. Not necessarily have the parachute or everything in place, but I know this is what I want to do. This is what I feel in my heart, and I did it, and I'm going into year number 18.
Excellent, excellent. How do you approach small businesses with limited budgets, create their impactful messaging?
Well, it's the same whether it's a small company or a big company. The key that people have to understand, AD, is this. If you're stuck in where you are in your business now and you think to yourself, I don't necessarily want to hire a coach. Here's a really good analogy. If you go to one of these big supermarkets, now you're in Chicago, in the Illinois area, right? So you think about.
I'm originally from Chicago. I'm residing in Houston. So you got HEB, you got Kroger,
Okay.
you got what else you got down here? Yeah, those are the big ones.
Food Lion, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll think of Kroger. Kroger stores are massive, right? So let's say you want to go into the Kroger store and there's a particular item you want to get, you want to get chunky peanut butter. You haven't been to that store, but you're like, I got to have chunky peanut butter. You can go into the store and you can spend
This is
an hour.
realistic, by the way. Chunky peanut
yeah.
butter. I like that, but that's one of my
Okay.
favorites. But so I'm with
Love
you.
it. Yeah. You can go into that store. It's getting close to dinner time here too in New York. So I got to be careful about what food choices I'm starting to talk about. You can go into that Kroger and you can spend an hour searching up and down those aisles and never find that peanut butter, right? Waste an hour of your time. Or you can go into the store and look around and find the person who has the apron on that works at the store and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Store Clerk, where is the chunky peanut butter? Oh, that's in aisle 7, right side, bottom shelf. In 5 minutes, you're in the store, you got your hand on the 20 ounce, you're at the checkout, you're gone. The analogy there is if you're struggling to find what you need to find in business, you can spend days, weeks, months struggling to try to find it. And what is the cost of that to you?
Time.
What does that time cost you? And in the amount of time that it takes you to figure out what an expert who could help you with like this, you could already have the answer and be moving on. So what I always ask business owners who are not ready to make the investment into a coach is this: where are you going to be 3 months from now or 6 months from now? What's going to be different about what you're trying to do than what you're trying to do today? Because if you're struggling with your message or your strategy or how to define your customer or what your product line should be or what your branding should be or your elevator pitch should be or where you should advertise it, where you should be selling it, none of those things, for the most part, are going to change tomorrow, the next day, or the next day. If you don't know, you don't know. And that's what coaches will help you do. They will make that investment worthwhile. And keep this in mind too. When you make that investment into a coach, you're making it for now to get you from point A to maybe point F, G, H, I don't know where. But once you've got that investment and that knowledge and that know-how that that coach gave you, that's an asset you have for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You never have to pay for that again if you hired the right coach.
And that's when you're thinking long term, and that's the way it should be.
Right.
So what advice would you give someone who's launching a brand, but they're launching in a highly competitive market?
The number one piece of advice, you've got to look at the top 3 to 5 companies that are out there in that space doing what you do. And, regardless of what you think of how novel your product or your idea is, it's probably being done out there in your market. And you've got to find ways to differentiate your brand, your product, your service from the other people that are already delivering it. Because if it's not different, we don't really have a reason to change the habit we have. Great example. One of my clients opened a coffee shop, and I think this was in the Cincinnati area. And they, looked like a nice shop. We did all this work, virtually. And I said, what's different about your coffee shop? You can do something different? And this is like one of the initial conversations we had. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, in 2 seconds, I just did a Google search in your zip code. And I noticed that there's about 20, if I draw a circle, 2-mile circle around where your coffee shop is, there's around 20 other coffee shops, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, independent ones, all these other ones. They're all in business already. They already have customer patterns. People already know where to stop, where to park. They're comfortable talking to the owner. They know where it is on the way to work as they're weaving their way through traffic, and they know where to get to. What's going to make them change that buying pattern and go to your store beside the fact that it's a new store? They love their coffee. They love their barista. They love their corn muffin or whatever it is they get at their coffee shop. Why are they going to go to yours? What's going to make them change their habit? Do you have some freebies you're offering to get some people to sample and try and come in? I'm always amazed, AD, at businesses that open here in Long Island, where I am, within a mile of where I live. And I look, they open. I never get a postcard. I never get an invitation to come in. I never get a coupon to try a free sandwich or a soda or a coffee. And then 6 months later, they go out of business.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
You never even got in touch with me to invite me into your store. You just want to open and you think if you build it, they'll come. It just doesn't work that way.
It's not like the Field of Dreams.
No.
So when it comes to branding, I think there's a responsibility to be authentic, and you have to tell your story. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. How important is authenticity in branding, and especially in today's digital world where you see all kinds of stuff just coming at you anytime you look at the computer?
Oh my goodness, authenticity is so important because we can as human beings, right? We've got our cave person intuition that is baked into us from the inception of mankind. And we can tell right off the bat if something gives us a good feeling or a bad feeling. If it seems too good to be true, we know it's probably too good to be true. If it seems like it's genuine and real and it's something that's believable, it doesn't go past some ridiculous level of there's no way in the world that could be true, then there's a really good chance we're going to give it a shot or at least listen a little bit more to what the story is. And so it's really important to be genuine and forthright and empathetic. And that all comes from really understanding exactly who your target market is. If you're talking to, traditional mom housewives, they're going to have a certain way that they run their households. If you're talking to guys now that run the household, certainly done a different way. If you're talking to business people, it's going to be a different level of authenticity. So a lot of this voice and message has to be based on, do you know who you're speaking to? Because you've heard this adage also. When you're speaking to everybody, you're not really speaking to anybody.
Yes.
But if you're really specific and you know who your market is, you know the language, the lingo, you know where they are, there's a really good chance you're going to be able to connect with them on an authentic level because you're showing them you really understand who they are. You really understand an issue or a problem that they have and how your product, brand, or service is solving that. And that's what people really like to hear.
So when you think about the different styles of branding and commercials out there, you see this a lot when it comes to political campaigns and certain types of products. For example, beer. They tell a story. They might tell you, we've been brewing this beer for years, or it comes from the German mountains of this and that, or the politician may say, I'm from the neighborhood you're from. Tell me something. What role does storytelling play in creating a strong, memorable brand?
It plays a big role because people like to envision themselves as part of that heritage. And so that's the thing that gets people sold on a particular type of beer or soda or wine or food. People want to believe in that heritage and really where it does come from so that when they end up in the bar and they're ordering it, they want to envision that dream of where it came from, that it is really brewed from, the finest, hops, in the mountains of Colorado. What is that? Coors, I guess that's supposed to be coming, from the mountains, or, Heineken, is just, it's an ancient family recipe out of Germany. People do want to believe in these things. They do. Now, where I think they lose out is on the humor side of it, because I think you have to be careful about whether or not it's funny. I don't know that people necessarily drink based on funny. I'm not convinced that even though these insurance commercials are really funny, I'm not sure that that's a reason that somebody would want to go and buy insurance from Flo and that whole crew of people that do really funny ads that really entertain me.
Yeah.
But it's not something I want to think about when it comes to insurance. Now, obviously, they're a big, successful insurance company. They've tapped into something that I wouldn't do with my customers because I don't think insurance is funny. But everybody's got a different opinion about things like that.
So when it comes to branding and advertising, this is a large scale, but Tesla has a brand, and then Elon Musk has a brand. So when a person is starting out, how do you help clients balance their personal branding with their professional branding?
Okay, it's also a great question, AD. When you're first starting out in a company, whether you want to assume the place of the brand spokesperson or not, when you first get started, you are the brand and the brand is you. And it is really, really important to know that every single time you go out there, you are representing your brand and your brand heritage as part of who you are. Good example of that. A woman that I was working with recently in the education space, she's a professor and she sells um, services where she trains other educators and helps them get more advanced degrees so they can get paid more money as educators. And when we took a look at her social media campaign, she was doing all kinds of posts from the beach and from the golf course under her name. She had a doctorate and she was calling herself Dr. Whoever she was. But all these posts were featuring her in a bathing suit. And whether you like the way she looked in a bathing suit or not, they just weren't appropriate for her brand message.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I had to coach her on. If you want to do that, if you want to be that social person and be talking about going to the beach on the New Jersey shore, and you want to be showing people that you're a golfer or an athlete or you go out and do social things, that's great. Then take one of those social media accounts and make it AD's personal account. And now you're going to show us all the fun things you like doing with your family or with your buddies or on your own. And that's great. But now for you, in terms of AD and the Innovators Surveilled, everything that you put out there as the brand spokesperson, needs to be true to this brand that you are, this brand that you're building, so that when people see your social media posts, they tie back into your company. Until you get to the point that you can pay someone to be a spokesperson, which is pretty far down the line, like it or not, you are the spokesperson for the brand. You represent it, and people look at you as that voice of the brand. So it's really, really important to make sure that everything you're doing out there in the public space that relates back to your brand and relates back to you speaks a unified message to people so they understand who you are and what you are about with your company.
That's very good advice. Speaking of social media, when it comes to this digital age and branding in the digital age, how do you see AI and other digital tools shaping the future of branding and messaging?
Well, it's a great tool to have, but we still have to be really, really careful that we're not just getting lazy and relying on AI to write our social media posts, to represent who we are as a company. If you want to use any of those services to create a baseline that you can build off of and individualize and add your own contextualism too in terms of what you're saying so that it's written in your style, that is still really, really important because you can very often, I think we met on LinkedIn. You can go to somebody's LinkedIn profile and almost immediately look at the ones that have been created by AI because they are so generically written in nature and they don't really address somebody's real unique characteristics and pinpoints about the things that make them unique in the space they're in. And so they just look like this homogenized description of what a consultant is or homogenized description of what a real estate professional is. And they don't really do anything to distinguish the user. So yes, can you use AI to help you? Does it help you get things done a bit faster? It does. But you have to be really careful about making sure the content you use represents you and is written uniquely by you. And look, the last thing in the world you want to do is be accused of using AI as plagiarism to make it look like that's your content, because ultimately someone is going to get in touch with you, pick up the phone, and want to know that you can do something And if you're relying on AI, now what are you going to tell them when they want you to write something for them?
Yeah, this goes back to the authenticity we were talking about earlier. I know you don't have
Yes.
a lot of time, so I'm going to ask you a couple of more questions and we'll wrap it up. So, what's the most rewarding part of your work as a branding expert when you look back at your career, some of the valuable lessons you've learned, and what's some of the most rewarding things that you can say you've experienced?
Well, as a guy who's been involved in products, there's certainly nothing more exciting than seeing one of the products that you developed, a brand that you developed, actually get out on a shelf in one of the big retail stores. And I've been lucky enough to have that success with at Walmart, at Target, at Lowe's, at CVS, at some of the really, really big major retailers in the States. That's always exciting to know that you created something and were able to develop it to the point. At one point, I had a line of suction cups that I did, the kind of suction cups you would use in your bathroom or your kitchen, and I was actually the suction king on QVC for a season, where I was on there 6 or 7 times. I was really proud of that. We didn't sell millions and millions of units.
You sure? Because
but
I think my wife has a million of them. I don't think you may have.
That's funny. Yeah, it's a long time ago, but it's always a proud moment when something that you developed from the ground up ends up getting into a buying plan for one of these major retail stores.
Excellent, excellent. So, are there any upcoming projects, books, or ventures that you could tell us about?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a next book, and the next book is really it's going to be called The Story of You, and it's also going to be written in rhyme, and it's going to be a challenge to anybody who reads it to go back into their memory bank and pull out the different experiences that they had in their lives that made them who they are today. It's a really interesting introspective look back on what were the really important key moments in your life that guided you to be the unique person that you are today. And the idea about it is to really to develop a sense of pride about how special and unique each of us are.
Great, great. Well, Glenn, it's been such an honor to have you on the show, to talk to you today. Your expertise in branding and messaging has given us a lot to think about, from crafting international messages to creating impactful, authentic brands. We thank you for having you on the show. And to our
Thank you.
listeners, Glenn's journey reminds us that there's clear communication and there's clear and authenticity. And if we use these two things as the cornerstones for building trust and a connection with our audience, we will be successful. So please be sure to check out Glenn's book, A Brand in Your Hand, and explore more of Glenn's work online. Please tell us any websites or any social media where we could find you, Glenn.
Sure. Please find me at alwaysbeencreative.com. There's a link there where you can set up a nice introduction call with me. I'd love to meet anybody who's hearing our podcast today. You can find me on LinkedIn. I believe I am the only Glenn Rudin on there, and I love interacting with people there. Same thing with Instagram. It's Glenn_Rudin_message_master. And what you'll find in LinkedIn and Instagram from me, AD, is just consistent posting on branding, on messaging, on business strategy, tips, tricks, things to keep in mind. I've got a post that goes out now every week called Message Master Thoughts, all important things that if you're really looking to up your game in branding, messaging, and business strategy, you won't go wrong following my posts and listening along with the different podcast appearances and advice that I give you there.
Excellent. We look forward to it. And to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe, share, and rate this podcast. And as always, keep innovating, keep creating, and never stop unveiling your inner innovator. Until next time, I'm your host, A.D. Edwards, signing out.
You've been listening to Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. Our passion is to take you on a journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. It's an honor to have on the show the creative geniuses shaping our future. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. Hit our website at inglesidereviews.com. On Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Ingleside Reviews. And on Twitter at Ingleside Review. See you next time.